St. Paul Nation is a community of believers that exercises its civil responsibility by voting. In preparation of our June 22nd primary day, please join us as we meet the candidates.
Good morning. This segment is called Meet the Candidates. If we were on campus today, this place would be jam-packed, and we would make available an opportunity for candidates to talk to us so we could meet them. And so since we're virtual today, we have created this segment called Meet the Candidates. As you know, St. Paul Nation, we're nonpartisan and we don't endorse candidates, but we do inform our community. And so with that being said, I am grateful and delighted today to have a candidate with us running for mayor, Maya Wiley. I'm excited to have you here today, and it's good to meet you in person. We've spoken in the past and an opportunity to meet over Zoom. Can I ask you a question before we do this interview? Are you all zoomed out like I am at this point?
I am so zoomed out that I don't care that the sanctuary isn't full. I'm just happy to be in it.
And we're glad to have you. As you know, also, St. Paul Community Baptist Church is a part of East Brooklyn Congregations and Metro IAF. And we have a vision statement that we sent to all the candidates to relate to, and it just talks about our vision for New York City. And we've had an opportunity in the past to talk about that just a little bit. And so we're going to relate to that. And before we end, you're going to get an opportunity to tell St. Paul Nation why you should be mayor of New York City. So I just wanted to ask you this. In the vision statement, we talked about housing, public housing, education, broadband, mental health. We've talked about criminal justice reform. I want to talk about one, maybe two of those subjects today, and perhaps you can talk about one that you want to lift today and shift the conversation a little bit there. But let me just talk about public housing. We think and believe that public housing should be repaired from top to bottom. As you know, the federal government is talking about at least $40 billion. Senator Schumer and others are working to push that to $80 billion because it's going to take that around the country, but we need approximately $40 billion in New York in order to save public housing. That's our position today. And we also believe that we need to have a serious conversation about building senior affordable housing we need to do that on public land and use all the land available to make sure that our seniors who've lived their lives in this city can live their golden years with dignity. And that's our position today. We want to know what your reaction is to that.
I am with you. Now, let me say a little bit more about that, Reverend. Because
Sure.
So first of all, let me say, as someone who is a civil rights lawyer, who comes from civil rights activists, including a stepfather who was very engaged both through United Church of Christ and National Council of Churches in racial justice work. I'm very familiar with the history and also the work of IAF, including Nehemiah Houses. So I want to both be thankful for all that work and all the work that's going to continue to come. But look, for me, as someone who's spent my whole career on racial justice, including structural racism, systemic racism, something that this congregation was just praying about to end when I walked through the door, this is a critical part of it because we have to keep public housing public. It is one of the things that called me into this race is that we had COVID's a crisis.
Yes.
But we had an affordability crisis before COVID.
Before COVID.
We had a structural racism crisis before COVID. Every single thing that's in the vision statement that IAF has, that this congregation has, was a dire need before COVID, and COVID has fast-tracked it.
Yes.
Made it more dire, deepened it, put it on a bullet train. So public housing has to stay public. I've got a plan already on the table that was $10 billion and is $10 billion in capital construction. I'm doubling the amount of the capital construction budget so that we can attack structural racism.
All right.
Because as we know, one, we have to have jobs that enable us to pay the rent. So in my plan, yes, do I get a witness?
You got a witness
Okay,
here.
I heard someone out there. Right? You can't pay the rent if you don't have a job.
That's correct.
And in our communities, we have had double the rates of unemployment before COVID and lost more jobs because of COVID, as well as Latinos, right? People of color got hit the hardest. So it's creating 100,000 new jobs, but to build things we need built and fix things we need fixed. So what do we need built?
Yeah.
Affordable housing where we can actually pay the rent.
I'm glad you said that.
And so that is to create more affordable housing, right? You know, whether you earn $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year, you should be able to afford to pay the rent. But the other thing is for public housing, $2 billion of that is earmarked. So on day one, $2 billion I can start moving into fixing public housing without regard to what Congress does. I'm going to fight for that $40 billion to come in New York City, and proud to be endorsed by Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, who introduced the bill that was going to bring this money to New York. Then President Biden comes out with his infrastructure bill, and then they get to work saying, no, double it, so that, because he said $40 billion, as you just said. But we are more than half the public housing stock of the nation. So whatever that bill is, we're going to get about half. So you're absolutely right. So, but my point is we will put skin in the game on day one, not wait for Congress.
Let me ask you this, and then I'll ask you to think about one item on that vision statement that you want to talk about. But the last thing I want to talk about, you talked about structural racism, the inequities in the system. Here in East New York, in Brownsville, as you just noted, Nehemiah houses, right? You talk about $2 billion of equity in this community based on Nehemiah homes for the folks who live here. That means people who lived here had an opportunity at the American dream. It is our position that we need to exponentially create this opportunity throughout our city, and by the way, throughout the country.
Yes.
And we're asking our city to lead the way. As we've done it in East New York, as we've done it in Brownsville, we should continue. Now, I'm going to ask you this. If you should emerge from this as the mayor of New York City, would you fast-track construction, affordable housing and houses in our communities and throughout our city?
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
I mean, that was look, New Deal New York, which is my capital construction budget, doubling that budget, that's what it's for. And look, the thing about the capital construction budget, when I am mayor, black girl magic, y'all. When I am mayor, I can start this on day one because I don't need agreement from Albany or dollars from DC for that capital construction budget. So I started with that plan to say, yes, do we want more from the state? Do we want more from Washington? Of course we do. But we're also not going to wait because our people can't wait. Because the other thing is we're seeing 400,000 people facing eviction because of COVID. That's on top of the 200,000 who were facing eviction before COVID.
That is correct.
We have almost 60,000 people homeless now today. We going to add 400,000? No, we're not. No, we're not. Because not only are we going to have an eviction moratorium, we're going to have one that takes our federal relief dollars and subsidizes the homeowners holding onto their homes by renting to pay their mortgage so that they can still pay the rent without evicting the tenant. And the same for our small landlords, because that's what Nehemiah Houses represents. That's what ending the racial wealth gap represented, is ownership. So we also can't lose that while we're holding on to the ability of our people to stay in homes who are renting. So I say that because we are going to look at housing in a comprehensive way. So fast track that model, absolutely. More partnerships for not-for-profit housing developers, because the thing about Nehemiah, the thing about that model, permanent, and affordable, and holds on to people. The eviction rates are lowest from this housing. So we're going to look at public housing, we're going to look at ending homelessness, and we're going to look at creating more affordable housing and helping homeowners hold on to housing, because that's the way we have to approach it as a city, looking at all of it together as housing. And that's what Maya Wiley as mayor will do.
Okay, let me do this because we're coming to the end of this segment, but I'm going to ask you this one question. If you should emerge from the primary as the candidate.
I'm working on your language.
You're working on my language, I understand that. If you should emerge and you are the candidate, the Democratic candidate, would you be willing to meet with us? Because we can't wait to January. We want to get to work as soon as possible. Would you meet with us as soon as you become that candidate?
I'll meet with you tomorrow.
All right.
And that's
all right.
the honest truth. Because the only way that we're going to do this is together. It takes the entire city. This is an all hands on deck. All hands on deck. And there's nobody in this room or in this city that doesn't have some hands to put on that deck. And one of the things we need in the next leadership of this city is a mayor that understands what change looks like. And understands how to manage change. That's what the daughter of civil rights activists knows. That's what a civil rights lawyer knows. And that's what someone who's also managed change inside city government knows. And that means partnership.
Maya, let me do this. That's the camera. I need you to tell the folks, this is it, your 30-second speech. Tell folks in 30 seconds why they should vote for Maya Wiley.
In this historic crisis, we also have an historic opportunity to do something we have never done before. We always recover from a crisis, but we have never recovered, all of us. But this time, with a Maya Wiley as mayor, that will be different. Because we've never had a mother as mayor. We've never had a civil rights lawyer as mayor. But after June 22nd, if you vote for me, we will have affordable housing. We will have trauma-informed care in our schools. We will transform the police department so we're safe from crime and police violence. And we will hold them accountable. But every single day, we will be partnering to bring our communities back together by investing in the communities hit hardest first, and to do it together.
All right, St. Paul Nation, I can't tell you who to vote for, but I will say this, I need you to go out and vote. I need you to go out and vote. Thank you so much, Maya, for coming today to share with St. Paul Nation, and best of luck to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the vision. We're going to get it done.
Thank you. Blessings.